Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. The college football playoff bracket came out on Sunday, and for a lot of the college football media, it's talking Ohio State, Tennessee, Notre Dame, Indiana. It's still breaking down SMU, Alabama. Not us here on the Aaron Torres pod, because Monday was another notable day on the college football calendar. The portal officially opened, baby. Now, listen, obviously, once the regular season ended, we started learning names of players that could potentially be entering. Monday was, by technicality, the first day players could enter. And so what I want to do is spend the next 7, 8, 10, whatever it ends up being, 15 minutes talking about the big names that have entered as of about 3:30 p.m. Eastern time here on Monday. As I always warn you, in the portal, stuff is subject to change. So we might be talking about guys by the time you watch this, guys have committed, guys are starting to take visits, whatever. But I'm getting you the latest information in real time. And speaking of which, before we get to it, make sure that you are following our transfer portal pages on both Instagram and Twitter. CFB Transfers. It's that simple. CFB Transfers on Instagram, CFB Transfers on Twitter. If you're looking for it, it's that logo that you see at the top of your screen. CFB Transfers on Twitter, CFB Transfers on Instagram for all your late breaking news on visits, commits, and much more. With that said, let's go ahead and dive into the news of Monday. A lot of names kind of floating out Sunday into Monday. Let's start with the quarterbacks. We'll start with the new names first, and then maybe some updates on some guys that have basically unofficially been in for a few days. And I would say the biggest new name, as far as I'm concerned, Darian Mensah, the quarterback from Tulane. Okay, if you follow college football, you know that Tulane was basically a top 25 team all year. They were a team that, of course, was playing for an AAC title this weekend. It did not work out. They did not beat Army, but you can't blame Darian Mensah. He was forget the best quarterbacks in the group of five. I think he was one of the better quarterbacks in all of college football. 2,700 yards passing, 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He did it as a redshirt freshman. And listen, you even go to the Army game on Friday night when they lost in the AAC championship game. Don't blame him. 17 of 25 passing, 209 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So this kid is elite. You know, this is kind of the new world where even at a place like Tulane, where John Summerall is working on a long-term extension, doesn't change the fact that you could lose your quarterback. This kid enters. What I would say is, one, I think he's as talented as any of these guys. I think we're going to talk about a lot of guys throughout the next few weeks, maybe from the Power Four that have big names but haven't been productive. This kid has produced on the big stages against good teams. By the way, in Tulane's biggest games this year, he had some of his best moments. You go back to early in the season against Kansas State, threw for 342 yards and 2 touchdowns. You go to the Oklahoma game, he struggles a little bit there, but then a few weeks later, whether it's a UAB, USF, whatever, has some monster games. So I bring it up because he is a very talented player, and I'll be curious to see what happens in his recruitment. He's originally from Southern California. Now, it is worth noting with him. I said SoCal, but it's more like mid-central California, San Luis Obispo, whatever. But USC is obviously a school that's going to need a quarterback. But what is also worth noting, what I want to talk about with Darian Mensah, if you go back to the day that Bryce Underwood decommitted from LSU, we had a live stream that day, and there were LSU fans in the live stream adamant that if Bryce Underwood decommitted, which he did, that this was the backup plan. So the one thing I will say, I don't have any personal sourcing that LSU is a favorite, but obviously Tulane's right down the street. And the one thing we know about college football, yeah, you want to sign, fill in the blank, whether it's the star recruit, the star portal guy, the star this, the star that. But everybody, the good coaches, the good programs, they have a backup plan, and they have the backup plan to the backup plan. And so when Bryce Underwood decommitted, they weren't going into next year without a plan at quarterback. Darian Mensah would obviously be I think a major get for LSU. Now, I think a lot of it depends on the next couple of days. We'll see if Garrett Nussmeier declares for the draft or not. But Darian Mensah, you could argue, based on actual production, as good as any quarterback currently in the portal. So Darian Mensah is the first big name that has entered within the last few hours. Outside of that, some of the other quarterbacks have kind of publicly been in the portal for a few days or publicly said they're going to leave. Just one other name that's of note that entered Sunday into Monday, Devin Brown from Ohio State. So Devin Brown, wild and weird circumstances with him at Ohio State. This was a kid 2 years ago. He was battling with Kyle McCord after CJ Stroud left to go to the NFL. It was him and Kyle McCord battling for that starting spot. And if you followed all the Ohio State message boards and blogs and podcasts and whatever, they were adamant that it was neck and neck between him and McCord, and that at certain points in the fall, even though it was perceived to be Kyle McCord's job, that Devin Brown was actually leading. Then he gets hurt late in camp. Kyle McCord starts. They're trying to work Devin Brown in. If you remember, about week 3, week 4, they had to play at Notre Dame. And Ryan Day, listen, I could criticize him for a lot, but basically he had to make a decision on a starting quarterback. He said, we can't keep playing 2 quarterbacks. They go with McCord. McCord goes 11-1. But then what was also interesting about him is that Devin Brown, if you remember, was named the starter for the bowl game last year after Kyle McCord was basically forced out. Ohio State fans would tell you it wasn't quite that way, but Kyle McCord was basically forced out. So Kyle McCord leaves. Devin Brown is named the starter for the bowl game, and all I hear all month is, this is the guy. This is the future. This is this. This is that. Then they play Missouri. He gets injured in the first quarter. They have to go to the third stringer, Kineholz. And at that point, Ohio State basically says this kid has an injury history. Ryan Day says we got to go get another quarterback. So just an interesting career arc because he was there for 3 years, was basically a redshirt in CJ Stroud's final year, almost won the job as a redshirt freshman in 2023, then backs up Will Howard this year. Doesn't have a ton of production, as you can see on the screen there, 26 of 47, 325 yards, 3 touchdowns in his career. But he's a guy that I still believe will be in demand. What I am genuinely curious about from the Ohio State side of things, is this the only quarterback that enters the portal after this season? Will Howard graduates. Devin Brown, of course, has entered the portal. They have Julian Sayin and Aaron Nolan from the last year's recruiting class, and they have Tavian St. Clair coming in. They also have, by the way, Kineholz, the kid I just mentioned, who signed in 2023. So I bring it up because they are now technically still have 5 scholarship quarterbacks on their roster. As you can see on the screen, Devin Brown will stay through the bowl season, postseason, I guess you would say playoffs. But I'm curious. Will Howard's gone. Devin Brown's gone. I think Julian Sayin has the inside track. A lot of people like Tavian St. Clair, the 5-star in the 2025 class. But the point I'm trying to make, I don't think this is the last quarterback from Ohio State that enters the portal. So we will see what happens from there. From here, what I want to do is kind of switch gears to some guys that feel like they couldn't, again, officially enter the portal until Monday, but they unofficially announced last week. You know that the back channeling has started, and it feels like we're already getting some moves made on some big names. First off, it is worth noting Jackson Arnold, of course, the former Oklahoma quarterback, really kind of unique situation. We'll talk about his situation, but the crystal balls are starting to roll in. By the time you listen to this, it might be a done deal. So again, we're recording in real time. Jackson Arnold has not officially committed yet, but I bring it up because on Monday morning, we started to see crystal balls roll in for Jackson Arnold to go to Mississippi State, actually. That the noteworthy thing there, of course, Jeff Lebby was the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma. He leaves for Mississippi State. The move would be for Jackson Arnold to follow him. Let me say this about Jackson Arnold. I'm going to give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, okay? So this year was benched, threw for 1,400 yards, 63%, 12 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and also rushed for 444 yards, as you can see on the screen. I bring it up because I know he's got kind of I don't want to say he has a bad rep, but I don't think there's a lot of people that believe he's a difference maker quarterback. I think that kid got such a raw deal, and it's not all Brent Venables. I'm not saying it's all Brent Venables' fault, but the O-line was always going to be a problem. It became a problem, and then the second adversity hit, they benched him for Michael Hawkins. Of course, as soon as Michael Hawkins plays a few games, you realize he's probably not the answer, at least not yet. Jackson Arnold is thrown back in. And I'll say this for Jackson Arnold. I actually respect how he played, how he fought, at Oklahoma this year. That O-line was not good. He got beat up a lot, but he certainly had his moments, most notably leading Oklahoma to that win over Alabama. So I wish him luck. I'd be curious if maybe he should poke around a little bit more for, listen, Mississippi State fans, I don't mean to be offensive, but can you find a better situation? I mean, you didn't have much of an O-line this year. I don't know how good the O-line is going to be next year. So I get it. I get why you would want to go to Mississippi State. I also wonder if it was worth just poking around a little bit more. But as I said, the crystal balls are starting to roll in. We'll see what happens there. Interesting name, interesting player, interesting update. So this is one of the players that we did talk about last week on our first portal update, Caden Salter, the transfer from Liberty. If you remember, 2 years ago, the 2023 season was awesome. Led Liberty to a 13-1 season. They win, what was it, Conference USA? I can't even keep the G5 conferences the same anymore. I apologize. But leads Liberty to a Fiesta Bowl, I should say. And just an unbelievable year in 2023. 32 passing touchdowns, 12 rushing touchdowns, over 1,000 yards rushing. So he is a true dual threat quarterback. Thought it was interesting. One, he entered the portal last year, decided to come back. Two, thought there was a possibility he could follow former Liberty head coach Hugh Freeze down to Auburn, but that does not seem to be in the cards. Saw a report out. I would give credit. I think it was on 3. I don't want to credit the wrong person, but I don't want to give credit as well, that he has already set up a visit to Syracuse and that there could be visits to Florida State and Colorado coming. I think all 3 of those are interesting. One, with Syracuse, we are going to see over the next couple minutes, they are going to be very aggressive in the portal at Syracuse. Kyle McCord obviously just led him to a 9-3 season. He is out of eligibility last year. They're going to need another quarterback, and it feels as though they're full speed ahead over there in finding the replacement. So Syracuse, it sounds like we'll get a visit. What's interesting is the other 2. First, you have Florida State, and listen, Gus Malzahn, remember, is the offensive coordinator there. You could criticize Gus Malzahn, the head coach, but loves his dual threat quarterbacks from Cam Newton to Nick Marshall to Bo Nix to whomever, KJ Jefferson this year, although they obviously started 2 or 3 or 4 different quarterbacks at UCF this year. Just bring it up because it feels like that would be kind of a perfect fit for him if he makes it to that Florida State visit. Again, we'll visit Syracuse beforehand. And then I think Colorado's kind of just interesting because we know they just got Julian Lewis, the 5-star quarterback in the class of 2025. And Julian Lewis was pretty outspoken about part of the reason I wanted to go to Colorado was because I know I'm going to have the opportunity to play early there and potentially start as a day 1 guy. So Colorado now appears, are they possibly looking at veteran quarterbacks to kind of bridge the gap so not everything is on Julian Lewis's shoulders? Think that's interesting, but Caden Salter, it appears as though, has 3 visits pretty much in the books. Mentioned a minute ago that there was other quarterbacks that have been linked to Syracuse. Interesting one that I saw over the weekend, Connor Wigman from Texas A&M. Connor Wigman, of course, is the former 5-star. Another kid, you feel bad, weird career trajectory, was basically deemed the savior. If you remember in that 2022 season, that was when Texas A&M went 5-7. All those freshmen were on campus, and it was just kind of chaos, right? So that was the year Jimbo Fisher kind of falls apart. But if you remember, the team stunk, but Connor Wigman comes in the final day of the regular season, beats LSU at home, and you think the future is bright. Then the next season starts, he gets hurt, missed all of last year, starts this year, really struggles. And of course, he was eventually replaced by Marcel Reed, that he comes back in. It was a weird season. And then, of course, got replaced by Marcel Reed a second time. And so I bring it up because he's had an interesting career, but he is a former 5-star. As you can see, when he got to A&M, he was the number 1 quarterback in America in a class that had Drew Aller, Cade Klubnik, guys like that. But just, again, the statistics weren't great, but he won a lot of games. This year, 56% completion percentage, obviously will need to get better. The best year was a very brief window where he played in 2023, 8 touchdowns, 2 interceptions last year, and was pretty good as a true freshman, like I said, in beating LSU. The schools that are early in the mix on this one. I saw a report over the weekend. It looks like Syracuse, which we just mentioned, is clearly looking for a veteran quarterback. Iowa, Wisconsin, Missouri, Louisville, and maybe possibly Houston in the mix as well. I think Iowa's a school. Clearly, Cade McNamara is gone. They're going to be looking for a quarterback. Wisconsin's just interesting because they fired their offensive coordinator, Phil Longo, the air raid guy in the middle of the year. So I think they're going to go to a more traditional pro-style kind of setup. Connor Wigman will transfer. I don't know that as of right now, we are very close to getting to the finish line on him. Let's switch gears to some things other than the quarterback spot. Thought this was interesting. Jonte Cook, former 5-star, was at Texas the last few years. Another, again, I know I keep saying interesting career arc. First of all, 5-star. If you remember, he was a kid that during the recruiting process took visits to Bama, took visits to Texas A&M, took visits to Texas. And there was a very viral clip, I remember because we shared it from the Torres on Bama account, of him at Texas A&M saying, guys, where's all the trophies? I see a bunch of trophy cases. I don't see any trophies. And so I bring it up because Texas A&M was kind of a punching bag at that moment in time. Well, according to reports, it appears as though Oregon and Texas A&M could be in the lead. Played 2 years at Texas. Listen, I don't think because he wasn't super productive, 2 touchdowns in those 2 years, I don't think that means that he isn't good. I just think Texas had a lot of talent. Last year they had A.D. Mitchell. Last year they had Xavier Worthy. This year, of course, they bring in Ryan Wingo. They bring in Silas Bolden from the portal. They bring in Matthew Golden. And so that was a talented group. Isaiah Bond from the beginning, and I think he just got lost in the shuffle. It appears as though, again, via On3, that Texas A&M and Oregon are the perceived leaders. We'll note this, though. Saw this on Twitter. Did you see where he is now in Coach Prime, Colorado's mentions? And he tweeted, or he didn't tweet, he was on Coach Prime's Instagram page, and he what's the right word? He commented on one of Coach Prime's posts, Coach, I ain't hard to find. And so I don't know if there's something going on behind the scenes there, if he wants Colorado to give him a look, but the early reports do seem to indicate that Oregon and Texas A&M are the perceived leaders. One thing, producer Matt, I forgot to give you these names, so I apologize. But 2 Alabama wide receivers went into the portal yesterday. Caleb Odom, former 5-star, 6'5" freshman, only had 7 receptions this season. But he is a former 5-star, and he is obviously going to be in very high demand. Also worth noting, Kendrick Law goes into the portal, 10 catches for 105 yards. He's a burner. I think he's a very special talent. I think the sad thing about him is that if you remember, he was the guy that got the penalty that pushed them back late in the Tennessee game when they were, what was it, a 4th and 7? He gets a 15-yard penalty, et cetera, et cetera. I just bring it up because that is unfortunately what I feel like he will be remembered for. But I will say that Kalen DeBoer did comment. I guess he had a media availability on Monday where he said, quote, that, he's, or I guess it was Sunday night after the bowl game announcement, that he called Kendrick Law a super unselfish guy, did whatever it took to help him win, on and on and on. And so I bring it up because those 2 entered the portal on Sunday night, Kendrick Law and Caleb Odom. Also, Kobe Prentice entered unofficially late last week. Really quickly, let's get to the defensive side of the ball. I think there were a couple interesting notes on defense. Remember the name Bear Alexander? So Bear Alexander was the kid that was a former 5-star, started his career at Georgia, was played on Georgia's national championship team, the second one, which was the team that beat TCU, played in the championship game. Decides after that to transfer. It was kind of a stunning transfer because he was expected to get some big snaps and moments and I don't want to say big minutes. That doesn't sound right for football, but basically was expected to have a big role for Georgia last season in 2023. Decides to transfer to USC, plays at USC. What's kind of interesting there is was up and down, had moments, but also moments where it felt like, what's the right word? Let's just say the motor wasn't always running the hottest. And I think there was some frustration in that program about some effort stuff. Independent of that, 4 games into the season, decides, you know what, I'm going to not burn my red shirt this year. I'm going to take a red shirt, announces he will not be coming back. Well, I bring it up because, first of all, he is still a talent if you can get the most out of him. And I saw that 24/7 Sports reference that he has already a long list of schools that has reached out: Oregon, Penn State, SMU, Texas, Colorado, and potentially a return to Georgia as well. One thing I will say, there just aren't that many guys with that size, that athleticism, and it speaks to the schools that are interested that they're willing to give him another chance after 2 kind of up and down years when Georgia, Texas, Colorado. Listen, say what you want about Coach Prime. He ain't going to take slacking. What do they say? Smart, fast, tough, disciplined with character. So when those type of schools are interested, it means that people are willing to take a chance on your talent. And it certainly appears as though that is the case here with Bear Alexander. Saw this one on late Sunday. Such a bummer, just the way this whole thing played out. Jacob Manu from Arizona. Remember, Arizona 2 years ago, not this past year, but the year before, 2023, won 10 games 2 years ago. They're building for this coming season. They got basically everybody returning. Tetairoa McMillan, who is going to be a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. Noah Fafita is coming back off of this incredible season. And then, boom, Jed Fish, right, mid-January, Kalen DeBoer leaves for Alabama. Jed Fish decides to leave for Washington. And listen, Arizona did a good job of keeping the core of that team together, but this season was just a train wreck. They ended up finishing overall the Arizona Wildcats in football. Remember, they were a top 25 team in the preseason. Remember, they started 10-3. They were 10-3 a year ago. They finished 4-8 this year, and that was after starting 3-1 on the season. So I'm not great at math, but you start 3-1, you finish 4-8. That means you went 1-8 in your last 9 games, or you went 1-7 in your last 8 games, excuse me. But Jacob Manu played like an All-American 2 years ago. 2 years ago, he was top 25 in the country in tackles with 116 tackles in 2023. This year, he had 47 tackles before he got hurt. Unfortunately, he did tear his ACL, enters the portal on Sunday night. Talked to somebody close to Arizona. They're not totally in belief that he is going to, that he is definitely going to transfer. I think there's a couple things. He did tear his ACL. Does he want to transfer right now in this moment? Does that limit some schools that might be interested in him, or does it not matter because he's so talented? A little bit undersized, but he plays his butt off. But I think there's also the possibility that he does return to Arizona. I actually think, despite everything, they're going to largely keep that core together. Now, Tetairoa McMillan is going to the NFL, but Noah Fafita, I don't think will be leaving. Jacob Manu, if he does leave, the place that I would keep an eye on is actually Texas. Akina at Texas is, of course, the Dwayne Akina is the he was at Arizona. He's now at Texas. And so I just bring it up because, or excuse me, whatever, you get the point, is that I think he could follow some of that. Some of that staff went to Texas last offseason, and I bring it up because I think he could end up at Texas as well. And then the last name, just really quick, this one should come down pretty soon. Jamari Butler, we talked about him in our first update. Jamari Butler was a player who was one of the best players on that Nebraska defense this past season. He finished with 7 TFLs, 2.5 sacks, unofficially entered the portal last week, and is already down to 3 schools: Florida State, LSU, and Texas A&M. Why that's noteworthy, of course, remember the defensive coordinator at Nebraska did go to Florida State. And so I just bring it up because with Tony White now headed to Florida State from Nebraska, you would think they would be a leader. Tell you what, that is all that I have right now on the portal. Again, we're recording about 3:45, 3:50 Eastern time right now. Stuff's going to change. Jackson Arnold might be committed by the time you hear this. We might get a list for Mensa. You go on and on down the list. The point that I'm trying to make, this stuff is going to move fast. We're going to be updating it regularly. So do me a quick favor. Make sure that you are subscribed, not only to the Aaron Torres Pod and Aaron Torres Pod YouTube, but also make sure you're following our accounts, CFB Transfers on Twitter and CFB Transfers on Instagram as well. We'll be back live Tuesday afternoon, and my guess is we'll probably be talking more portal at that point. Appreciate everybody for tuning in.